Hey guys, and welcome back to tutorial number 6 of this series. As you might have noticed, it's been quite a while since I uploaded the last video, and that's since I've been working quite hard on the new blog. I tried to make it as simple to use as possible. I've uploaded all the PSD files for the different tutorials, so you can go ahead and download them. And personally, I really think that's the best way to learn, to actually sit there, open Photoshop, and follow me as I go through the different tutorials. I think that sitting back and only watching is less effective than also practicing and doing it yourself. So like all the previous tutorials, also this tutorial has a PSD file which has this image here that we're going to use for the tutorial. And I do recommend that you go over to the site, download this PSD file. And just one last thing before we start, do check out the new Facebook page, Twitter, Dig. I mean, I've opened accounts for these tutorials in all the known social networks, so be sure to go ahead and check them out. I'm also going to be posting some secret stuff and tutorials in the Facebook page, so if you do like these tutorials, go ahead and like the Facebook page, and then you'll get updates. And you probably know how to use Facebook better than I do. I'm quite new to this business. Anyway, I think I've talked way too long about all this nonsense, so let's begin doing some Photoshop. So like you can see now, this is a photo we're going to be using today, and a before and after of this picture will be this one compared to this one. As you can see, there are a few things which have happened here. The background has changed, the picture was cropped, I've added some text which is parallel to the cup here. The water is kind of gray, and we're going to do something similar to this. And like I said before, please go ahead and download the PSD file and put this video on the side and Photoshop on the other side, and try to follow me or watch it and then try it yourself, because only watching will give you absolutely nothing. Now the way we're going to do this is by using the pen tool. Most people, mainly the new Photoshoppers, are absolutely terrified from this tool here, the pen tool. But if you know how to use it properly, it can become your best friend, and it should become your best friend, because this tool is probably the most accurate tool in Photoshop. And you can find it as well in Adobe Illustrator and After Effects, and it's very convenient to know this tool. In After Effects you can create masks using this tool efficiently, and this is just a tool you've really got to become friends with, because it is a fantastic tool which Adobe has given us. So first of all, we're going to separate this cup from the background, and I'll start my first anchor point down here beneath the cup and on the gray area, which is actually outside my canvas, but that does not matter because it will still work as a path. Okay, so the first anchor point will be right here, and since this is a straight line, my next anchor point will be right here before my first small curve here of the cup. I'll click and I'll have a straight line from the bottom to the top. My next anchor point will be at the end of this curve. I'll always look for the beginning and end of my curves, and that's the best way to work with the pen tool. I see that the start of my curve is right here where I put my anchor point, and then I'll search for the end of the curve, which will be around here, and I'll create another anchor point. Now notice that when I click and drag, okay, I'll do that again. I click and drag, I have two handles which modify the amount of my curve. Okay, the more I pull, the curve gets sharper. The less I pull, the curve is less sharp. And I can also go up and down, and all this affects my curve. Since this is a small curve, I will need to pull the handles just about until here, and that will do the job. Now once I release the handle, I still have my 2 points, and if I click on A, or go to this tool right here, which is Direct Selection tool, I can still change these handles and modify them to whatever way I'd like. So I'll put them back to about where they were, here, and I'll continue searching for the end of the next curve. I'll select my pen tool again by clicking on P, and I think the end of the curve will be around here. So I'll click and drag, and that looks about right. Now, as long as I still have the two handles active, the next anchor point will be affected by these two handles. Which means if I now create a point here, and I pull, the first reaction of this handle will be to go straight, and only then go up. But in some cases, that's not what you want to do. If I want this line to go straight from here to here, and again if I click here you see I have a curve because it's affected by this handle here. So the way to delete this handle is by clicking on Alt and clicking the point, and then what happens is it leaves only the left handle, which affects the previous anchor point. But now if I create another anchor point, it will be straight and without any curves. If I click and drag, I will get an anchor point, but it will be affected by the new anchor point I've just created and not by the previous anchor point. So in this case I've deleted my anchor point, and I'll create another one around here. Again, I search for the end of this curve, which is just around here, for example. And then I clicked and pulled until I had a nice curve which is which follows the outline of the cup. Again, I do not want my next point to be affected by my previous handle, so I'll click on Alt and click to delete that anchor point. My next anchor will be around here, and I'll go to around here, and then I'll zoom out a bit and close my path. Now once I've created a path, it will show up here in my Paths panel, or Paths tab, and right now it's called a work path, which means if I select somewhere else and I create a new path, see, my previous path was deleted. What I suggest doing, once you finish creating a path, go ahead and save that path. I'll call this one cup outline. Outline. And now if I go ahead and create a new path, it will create the new path and a new working path. Okay, that's very important because in some cases it takes a long time to create a path, and it's just a shame to lose it, not be able to use it later on. Now having a path is great because if I click on Control and click on my working path, I'll have a selection out of my cup outline. So I'll click. Oh, and if this happens to you, it's because we were working on subtract path instead of add path, and I'll explain about that in just a second. So if this did happen to you, Control Shift I to invert your selection, and then only your cup will be selected. The next path will make sure that we're not on subtract from path area, but on add to path area. We close our path, it will select only the specific path. Okay, so I've talked about saving path, I've talked about selecting our path. So next we're going to create the path for the drop and the water. So we're going to deselect our path and make sure current path is not selected, because if it is, we'll be drawing on our path. You see I made another shape here, which is not what we want to do right now. We want to make sure that our path is deselected, and then once I start drawing, I'll have a new working path, which later on I'll save it as well. So I'll go back and I'll start creating the outline of the water. So I'll zoom in a bit because working in zoom is better, and I'll start using the pen tool just like before, deleting the handles when I don't need them. Okay, so now again I have a working path, and I'll go ahead and save it by clicking up here and save path. I'll call it water. And now if I click it, I'll have only the selection and not like before, which I had all of my layers selected and I had to inverse. And that's because, like I said before, I used the add this time and not subtract. We'll go back to our background layer. We'll duplicate our background because we always want to have our background saved in case we need to make any kind of change later on. I'll go back to my Paths panel, and I'll make a selection of both of my both the cup and the water. And then I'll click on Control J to duplicate my selection. And then now if I look, I have only my cup and my drop, which as you can see is extremely nice and sharp. And now I can add any kind of gradient. Then I can go back to my Paths tab, select my water. Once I've made a selection of my water, I'll duplicate that layer by clicking Control J, and I will select it and make a gradient and change my mode to color to get the only the color on effect, and I'll change it a bit to something like this. Now that looks cool. And I'll do the same for the cup. I'll make a selection for my cup. I will duplicate it, and then I will color it red, and using the color mode I'll put it on color. Of course this affects also my watercolor because it's also on color mode, which takes the color from underneath. Okay, next, just to finish this up, I made a nice crop to give it nicer proportions, and I've added text using the same technique of the pen tool. And I'll drag this point here to extend my text. You can put it underneath the line or above the line. I chose to put it above, and then I'll drag this layer down. Obviously you can change the color of this to something a bit nicer, and add some effects on it, like inner shadow works well. And just some final points to end this tutorial. I'm going to create a rectangular and a circle next to each other. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to follow the lines of both things. Obviously the rectangular will be extremely easy. All I need to do is make 4 points, and I'm done. The circle, on the other hand, will be a bit more difficult, and the wrong way will be to create lots of anchor points like this, and here, and here. I'll continue this just to show you what I end up with. And then you fill it in with some color. You see immediately that it's not a perfect circle. If you compare it to the yellow underneath it, you can see that the yellow is a perfect circle and my red is not perfect. It has some dents here and there, and it really does not look that good. I'm going to do this now using a different technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this circle up into 4 different curves. One is here, one here, one around here in the middle. The next will be opposite my second anchor, and my fourth and final one will be here at the top. And now if I make a new layer and color it green, for example, I'll see that this shape is much closer to the circle I've made. And yes, I do have a dent here, but compared to the red one, it's way better, much more accurate. A circle is a very difficult shape to create, and that's why if you do need to make a selection of a circle, you can do so by going into the ellipse tool, making sure you're selected on the path tool, and simply create a nice perfect circle without the pen tool and just in seconds. So if you haven't downloaded the PSD file yet, go ahead and do so now. It only takes a second to download, and it will definitely help you out to train and try it yourself, because like I said at the beginning, only sitting back and watching will not give you anything. Okay, I hope this tutorial helped you out, and I'll see you again in tutorial number 7. Until then, bye bye.